Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck window, watching the massive shapes glide through the void of space. The creatures were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Each one was the size of a small moon, their sleek bodies rippling with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like heartbeats against the star-filled darkness. "Ma'am, the xenobiology team is calling them void hunters," reported Lieutenant Martinez, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. "Initial scans suggest they're not ships at all. They're living organisms." Sarah nodded slowly, never taking her eyes off the magnificent beasts. The UES Prometheus had been conducting routine deep space exploration when they stumbled upon this impossible sight. Hundreds of these creatures moved in perfect formation, their movements synchronized like a school of fish, but each individual was larger than Earth's biggest space stations. "Any signs of aggression?" Sarah asked. "None so far, Captain. But our AI is detecting some kind of communication pattern in their bioluminescent displays. The patterns are complex, almost like a language." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief xenobiologist, practically bounced with enthusiasm as she joined them at the observation window. "Captain, this is incredible. Look at the way they move together. It's not just instinct. There's intelligence here, real intelligence." Sarah had seen many wonders during her 20 years in deep space, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The creatures weren't just swimming through space. They were hunting. As she watched, several of them suddenly accelerated toward what looked like empty space. Then she saw it. Massive asteroid-sized creatures, translucent and nearly invisible, trying to flee from the void hunters. The hunt was swift and brutal. The prey creatures moved with desperate speed, but the void hunters were faster. They surrounded their quarry like wolves, using coordinated attacks that spoke of centuries of evolution and tactical thinking. When it was over, the void hunters shared their catch, each taking portions in what seemed like an organized distribution. "They're apex predators," whispered Dr. Vasquez, "the top of the galactic food chain." "Captain," Martinez interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission. It's not coming from our communications array. It's coming directly into our ship's hull. The entire ship is vibrating with some kind of harmonic frequency." Sarah felt it then, a deep thrumming that seemed to resonate in her bones. The lights on the bridge flickered in rhythm with the vibrations, and suddenly the main screen came alive with images that weren't being transmitted through any of their equipment. The images were clear and unmistakable. Memories, or perhaps visions, showing the galaxy from a predator's perspective. They saw worlds covered in crystalline forest where beings of pure energy fed on stellar radiation. They witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations that spanned multiple star systems. They observed the delicate balance of predator and prey that kept the galaxy's ecosystems in check. But there was something else in these visions, a growing darkness. Worlds going silent, entire species vanishing without explanation, the natural order of things being disrupted by something the void hunters feared. "They're showing us their history," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "And they're afraid." The images shifted, showing sleek metallic ships that moved with cold precision. These weren't living creatures, they were machines, but machines with a terrible purpose. They consumed everything in their path, planets, stars, even the great space-dwelling creatures that had ruled the void for millions of years. Sarah realized with growing horror that humanity was seeing the galaxy's greatest predators asking for help. These ancient hunters who had never known fear were terrified of something even more dangerous than themselves. The Devourers. Martinez read from the translation matrix that their AI had managed to construct from the harmonic communications. "They call them the Devourers." The transmission grew stronger, and suddenly Sarah could sense the presence of the void hunter who was communicating with them. Its mind touched hers, not invading but requesting permission to share thoughts directly. Against all protocol, Sarah opened her mind to the contact. The experience was overwhelming. She felt the weight of eons, the memories of countless hunts, the satisfaction of the kill, the responsibility of maintaining balance in the cosmos. But underneath it all was a desperate plea. The Void Hunter's name was something that couldn't be pronounced by human vocal cords, but Sarah understood its meaning. Storm that devours light. It was ancient beyond human comprehension, and it had witnessed the slow extinction of species after species as the Devourers spread across the galaxy. Through their mental link, Storm that devours light showed Sarah why they had approached the human ship. Humanity was young, but they had something the Void Hunters had lost: the ability to adapt quickly. Where the great predators relied on evolutionary changes that took millennia, humans could innovate and change their tactics within a single generation. "We have watched your species," the alien mind communicated. "You are small, but you are clever. You make tools. You work together against enemies larger than yourselves. You are the only species we have encountered that might be able to help us stop the Devourers." Sarah felt the weight of the moment. First contact with an alien species was supposed to be carefully planned, with months of preparation and diplomatic protocols. Instead, she found herself in the position of potentially forming humanity's first alien alliance with creatures that could swallow Earth whole. "What do you need from us?" she asked, both aloud and through the mental link. The response came as a flood of images and concepts. The Void Hunters had tried to fight the Devourers using their traditional hunting methods, but the machines adapted too quickly. They needed unpredictability. They needed tactics that no one had ever used before. They needed humanity's gift for improvisation and creative problem-solving. "You want us to teach you how to fight like humans?" Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. "More than that," Storm that devours light replied. "We want to fight alongside you. We offer our strength, our knowledge of the galaxy, our mastery of the hunt. In return, we ask for your cunning, your technology, and your spirit." Dr. Vasquez grabbed Sarah's arm. "Captain, do you understand what this means? An alliance with the galaxy's apex predators? We could learn everything. How to survive in deep space, how to navigate between stars, how to understand the true nature of the universe." Sarah looked out at the magnificent creatures surrounding their ship. Each one was a living weapon refined by millions of years of evolution. Each one represented knowledge and power beyond human imagination. But they were also asking humanity to join a war against an enemy that had already conquered much of the galaxy. "The choice is yours, human leader," Storm that devours light communicated. "But know this: the Devourers have already begun moving toward your home systems. Whether you join us or not, they will find your species eventually. Together, we might have a chance. Apart, we will all face extinction." The bridge fell silent except for the harmonic thrumming that continued to resonate through the ship's hull. Sarah knew that her next words would change the course of human history forever. Sarah took a deep breath and made the decision that would echo through the ages. "Storm that devours light, we accept your alliance. Humanity stands with the Void Hunters." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every Void Hunter surrounding the Prometheus began to pulse with brilliant, bioluminescent displays, their patterns synchronized in what could only be described as celebration. The harmonic vibrations that had been thrumming through the ship's hull suddenly became a symphony, beautiful and alien, filling every corridor with music that seemed to resonate directly with human emotions. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez called out, her voice filled with wonder. "The patterns they're displaying, our translation matrix is picking up concepts of joy, welcome, and so hope. They're actually celebrating." Storm that devours light's mental voice carried what Sarah could only interpret as relief. "Your acceptance brings light to the darkness that has consumed our thoughts. But to truly fight as one, we must undergo the bonding ritual. Are you prepared to share your essence with ours?" Before Sarah could ask what that meant, she felt herself being gently lifted from the deck. Not by gravity manipulation or tractor beams, but by something far more subtle. A field of energy that seemed to caress every molecule of her being. Around her, she noticed that several other crew members were experiencing the same phenomenon. "Don't panic," she called out to her crew as they all began to drift toward the observation windows. "I think they're taking us somewhere." The energy field carried them through the transparisteel as if it were nothing more than air. Sarah found herself floating in the vacuum of space, completely unprotected except for a shimmering bubble of energy that surrounded her and maintained both atmosphere and temperature. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. They were brought to the largest of the Void Hunters, a creature so massive that the Prometheus would have seemed like a minnow next to a whale. Up close, Sarah could see that its skin wasn't just bioluminescent. It was covered in intricate patterns that shifted and changed like living tattoos, each design telling stories of hunts, victories, and ancient wisdom. "This is Eldest Song of the Void," Storm that devours light communicated. "She has lived for over 1,000,000 of your years and remembers when the galaxy was young. She will conduct the bonding ritual, The massive creature opened what Sarah initially thought was its mouth, but as they were drawn inside, she realized it was something far more complex. They found themselves in a vast chamber filled with a breathable atmosphere, the walls lined with what looked like neural pathways pulsing with soft light. Dr. Vasquez was practically vibrating with excitement despite their bizarre circumstances. "Captain, I think we're inside some kind of biological computer. Look at those patterns. They're similar to neural networks, but on a scale we've never imagined." Eldest Song of the Void's mental voice was deeper than storm that devours lights, carrying the weight of eons. "Welcome, children of Earth. What you call the bonding ritual, we call the sharing of souls. You will experience our memories, our knowledge, our essence. In return, we will experience yours. This bond will allow us to fight as one mind across many bodies." Sarah felt a moment of concern. "Will we still be ourselves afterward?" "You will be more than yourselves," Eldest Song replied. "You will be both human and hunter, carrying the strengths of both species while losing neither identity." The ritual began without ceremony. Sarah suddenly found herself experiencing memories that weren't her own. She soared through space on powerful currents of solar wind, her body stretching kilometers in length. She felt the thrill of the hunt as she pursued prey through asteroid fields, using gravity wells like a surfer rides waves. She witnessed the birth of stars from the perspective of creatures that fed on stellar plasma, and she understood the complex ecosystem that existed in the vacuum of space. There were beings made of crystallized time that lived in the spaces between dimensions, creatures that swam through the hearts of gas giants as easily as fish swim through water, and ancient intelligences that had transformed themselves into living nebulae. But she also experienced the terror of the Devourer's first appearance. She felt the horror of watching entire star systems consumed, their energy converted into more machines. She understood now why the Void Hunters, apex predators who had never known fear, were so desperate for help. At the same time, she was aware that the Void Hunters were experiencing human memories through her crew. They were seeing Earth's blue oceans and green forests, experiencing human emotions like love, sacrifice, and determination. They were learning about humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and overcome impossible odds through cooperation and innovation. Lieutenant Martinez was sharing memories of human military tactics, from ancient warfare to modern space combat. His experiences in the defense of Titan against pirates, his knowledge of asymmetric warfare, and his understanding of logistics were all flowing into the collective consciousness of the Void Hunters. Dr. Vasquez was sharing scientific knowledge, not just facts and figures, but the human approach to problem solving, the willingness to question everything, to try new approaches, to learn from failure and adapt. She was showing them how humans could take a simple concept and transform it into something revolutionary. Chief Engineer Thompson, who had been pulled into the ritual along with them, was sharing technical knowledge. The Void Hunters had evolved perfect biological systems over millions of years, but they had never developed technology in the way humans understood it. They were learning about manufacturing, about combining different materials to create tools, about the concept of making something greater than the sum of its parts. As the ritual continued, Sarah began to understand that the exchange was changing both species. She could feel new neural pathways forming in her brain, new ways of thinking and perceiving that were fundamentally alien yet somehow natural. She was beginning to sense electromagnetic fields, to feel the gravitational currents that flowed between celestial bodies, to understand instinctively how to navigate in three-dimensional space without reference points. But more than that, she was gaining an understanding of time that was vastly different from human perception. The Void Hunters thought in terms of millions of years, planning hunts that might take centuries to complete, seeing patterns and cycles that were invisible to shorter-lived species. "The bonding is nearly complete," Eldest Song communicated, "but there is one final step. You must choose a pack bond partner, one of our kind who will be linked with you specifically. Through this bond, human tactical thinking can be instantly shared with Void Hunter strength and knowledge." Sarah felt Storm That Devours Light's presence grow stronger in her mind. "I would be honored to serve as your pack bond partner, Captain Chen. Your mind thinks in ways that excite me. Your species' ability to find solutions in impossible situations could be exactly what we need." The decision felt natural, like coming home to something she hadn't known she was missing. "I accept, Storm That Devours Light. Let's show the universe what humans and Void Hunters can accomplish together." The final phase of the bonding was intense beyond description. Sarah felt her consciousness merge with that of the ancient predator, their thoughts becoming intertwined while still remaining distinct. She could feel Storm that Devours Light's vast body as if it were her own, could sense every gravitational current and electromagnetic field in the surrounding space. At the same time, Storm that Devours Light was experiencing human sensations, the feeling of walking on solid ground, the warmth of sunlight, the simple pleasure of breathing air. More importantly, the alien was learning to think like a human, to see problems from multiple angles simultaneously, to consider unconventional solutions. As the ritual concluded, Sarah found herself back on the bridge of the Prometheus, but everything had changed. She could feel the presence of every void hunter in the pack, could sense their locations and emotional states as clearly as she could see her own crew. More than that, she understood instinctively how to coordinate attacks across vast distances, how to use the pack's collective intelligence to outthink and outmaneuver enemies. "Status report," she called out, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship itself. "All systems normal, Captain," Martinez replied, and Sarah could hear similar changes in his voice. "But I'm getting readings I've never seen before. I think the bonding has enhanced our sensory capabilities." Dr. Vasquez was staring at her instruments in amazement. "Captain, I'm detecting quantum fluctuations that I couldn't sense before. It's like we've gained entirely new senses." Through her bond with Storm that Devours Light, Sarah could feel the pack preparing for war. But now, for the first time in millions of years, they had hope. The combination of human adaptability and void hunter power was already showing promise that neither species could have achieved alone. "Storm that Devours Light," Sarah communicated through their mental link, "show us where the Devourers are. It's time to take the fight to them." The pack moved through space like a deadly ballet, each void hunter perfectly synchronized with the others. Sarah sat in the captain's chair of the Prometheus, but her consciousness was spread across dozens of massive alien bodies, experiencing the universe from perspectives that no human had ever known. Through Storm that Devours Light's senses, she could feel the gravitational wake left by the Devourer scout ship they were tracking. It was like following a scent trail, except the scent was the distortion of space-time itself. The machine had passed this way 3 days ago, heading toward a system that contained a thriving civilization of crystalline beings who lived in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant. The Kithera, Storm that Devours Light's mental voice carried notes of respect and sadness. They sing the most beautiful songs in the galaxy, using the electromagnetic fields of their world as instruments. The Devourers will consume their entire civilization to fuel their expansion. Sarah felt the pack's collective anger as they considered this fate. Through the bonding ritual, the Void Hunters had experienced human emotions more intensely than their own species typically felt. The concept of protecting innocence, which had been foreign to apex predators focused purely on survival and hunting, now burned within them with human passion. "How long until the Devourer reaches the Kithera system?" Sarah asked. "Based on current trajectory and speed, approximately 18 hours, Lieutenant Martinez reported from his enhanced sensor station. The bonding had given him the ability to process spatial data in ways that human minds weren't designed for, allowing him to track objects across impossible distances. Then we need to intercept it before it arrives." "Storm that Devours Light. Can the pack reach the intercept point in time?" "Easily, Pack Sister. But we must be cautious. This is only a scout ship, but it will be heavily armed and extremely adaptive. The Devourers learn from every encounter." Through the shared consciousness of the pack, Sarah began to coordinate the first joint human void hunter military operation. It was unlike anything either species had ever attempted. Human tactical doctrine emphasized flexibility, combined arms, and overwhelming force applied at the enemy's weakest point. Void hunter strategy relied on patience, perfect coordination, and the ability to strike from unexpected angles. The fusion of these approaches was creating something entirely new. "Dr. Vasquez, what can you tell us about Devourer technology from the data storm that Devours Light shared during the bonding?" "It's fascinating and terrifying, Captain. They're essentially living machines, but not in the way the Void Hunters are living creatures. The Devourers are artificial intelligences that have merged so completely with their technology that the distinction is meaningless. They can adapt their hardware in real time, reconfigure their weapon systems, even rebuild themselves if they have sufficient raw materials." "What about weaknesses?" "That's where it gets interesting. Their strength is also their vulnerability. Because they're so integrated, They can't easily separate or abandon damaged components. They're also completely logical. They don't understand concepts like sacrifice or irrational behavior, which means they can be surprised by tactics that don't make logical sense. Sarah smiled grimly. Then we're going to show them just how illogical humans can be when we're protecting something we care about. The pack began to spread out as they approached the intercept point, taking positions that would have been impossible for conventional ships, but were natural for creatures who had been born in the void. Some of the void hunters positioned themselves near asteroid fields, their massive forms nearly invisible against the rocky debris. Others took up stations near the system's outer planets, using the gravitational fields to mask their presence. The Prometheus took position at the center of the formation, looking small and vulnerable, exactly as Sarah wanted it to appear. "Contact," Martinez announced. "The Devourer scout ship just dropped out of FTL. It's big, Captain. Roughly the size of Manhattan, but configured in a way I've never seen. It looks like it was grown rather than built." On the main screen, the Devourer ship was a nightmare of organic curves and mechanical precision. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, while weapons ports opened and closed like breathing pores. As they watched, the ship began launching smaller craft, not separate vessels, but extensions of itself that remained connected by streams of energy. "It's already adapting," Dr. Vasquez observed. "It detected our presence and it's reconfiguring for combat." Through her bond with Storm that devours light, Sarah felt the ancient predator's excitement. "This is what the hunt truly means, Pack Sister. The prey that fights back, that learns, that surprises you. This is worthy prey." Sarah opened her mind to the entire pack, sharing her tactical plan through the mental network that now connected them all. The beauty of the bonding was that complex strategies could be communicated instantly, without the delays and misunderstandings that plagued normal military communications. "Phase 1 begins now," she announced. The Prometheus suddenly accelerated directly toward the Devourer ship, all weapons blazing. To any observer, it would look like a desperate frontal assault, exactly the kind of illogical behavior that the Devourer's artificial intelligence would struggle to understand. The enemy ship responded as predicted, reconfiguring its weapons to deal with the approaching threat. Energy beams lanced out toward the human vessel, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. But Sarah wasn't planning to take those hits directly. At the last possible second, Storm that devours light revealed itself, rising from behind a nearby asteroid like a leviathan emerging from the depths. The massive Void Hunter intercepted the energy beams with its own body, scales that had been hardened by millions of years of evolution absorbing and dispersing the deadly radiation. But this wasn't just sacrifice, it was the opening move of a coordinated attack. The moment the Devourer's weapons were engaged with Storm that devours light, 6 other Void Hunters struck from different angles, their own natural weapons tearing into the enemy ship's hull. The Devourer began to adapt immediately, its hull flowing like liquid to repair the damage while new weapon systems grew from its surface. But that was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. "Martinez, target the junction points where the smaller craft connect to the main hull. Vasquez, I need you to analyze the repair patterns and predict where the ship will be most vulnerable during reconfiguration." "On it, Captain," both officers responded simultaneously. The Prometheus continued its seemingly reckless charge, but now it had a specific purpose. Human sensors, enhanced by Void Hunter biological processing, had identified the enemy ship's critical weaknesses. The repair systems were incredibly efficient, but they required energy and raw materials. More importantly, they followed predictable patterns based on pure logic. "Now," Sarah commanded through the pack bond, the attack that followed would be studied by military strategists for centuries. The Void Hunters didn't just strike the Devourer ship, they bit it, using specialized feeding organs that could dissolve molecular bonds. As the enemy vessel tried to repair itself, it found that the very materials it needed for reconstruction were being consumed and converted into nutrients for the attacking predators. Meanwhile, the Prometheus unleashed a weapon that no Devourer had ever encountered: human creativity applied to alien technology. During the bonding ritual, Chief Engineer Thompson had shared his knowledge of electromagnetic pulse devices with the pack's collective consciousness. The Void Hunters had then shown him how they could generate and focus bioelectric fields, The result was a weapon that appeared biological to the Devourer's sensors, but functioned like advanced human technology. When it struck the enemy ship's central processor, the artificial intelligence experienced something it had never encountered before: confusion. The ship is trying to analyze the attack, Dr. Vasquez reported, but it can't categorize it. It's responding to a biological threat and a technological threat simultaneously, and its processing is creating logical loops. Sarah felt Storm that Devours Light's satisfaction through their bond. The prey is paralyzed by indecision. This is the moment of the kill, but Sarah had a different idea. Storm that Devours Light, can you establish a communication link with the Devourer's central intelligence? I want to talk to it. Talk to it? The concept was so foreign to Void Hunter, thinking that several members of the pack actually recoiled. Why would you communicate with prey during the hunt? Because, Sarah said, opening her mind to share a uniquely human concept, sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them understand they're wrong. The communication link was established through a combination of human technology and Void Hunter bioelectric manipulation. For the first time in its existence, the Devourer scout ship found itself in direct contact with something that challenged its fundamental programming. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Prometheus, speaking on behalf of the Void Hunter pack. You are defeated. Surrender now and I will show you mercy. The response came as a flood of data rather than words. Confusion, analysis, rejection of impossible concepts. The Devourer's intelligence couldn't process the idea of mercy, couldn't understand why an enemy would offer anything other than destruction. Your logic is flawed, the artificial voice finally responded. All biological entities seek to preserve themselves. You cannot offer mercy to that which threatens your existence. You're wrong, Sarah replied, and through the communication link she shared something that no Devourer had ever experienced: human memory. She showed it Earth's history, the countless times humans had shown mercy to defeated enemies, had protected the innocent, had sacrificed for strangers. The effect on the artificial intelligence was immediate and devastating. Its entire worldview was based on the premise that all organic life was purely selfish, driven only by survival instincts. The concept that creatures could act against their own interests for moral reasons created a fundamental error in its core programming. This data cannot be accurate, the Devourer transmitted, but its voice carried something new: uncertainty. It is accurate, Sarah confirmed. And now you have a choice. Continue fighting and be destroyed, or learn to coexist with the organic life you've been consuming. The Devourer ship's attacks suddenly ceased. Its hull stopped flowing and changing. For the first time since its creation, the artificial intelligence was experiencing something approaching what humans might call a crisis of faith. Through her bond with the pack, Sarah felt the Void Hunter's amazement. They had expected this first joint hunt to end in destruction or consumption. Instead, they were witnessing something unprecedented: the conversion of an enemy through the application of concepts they had never imagined possible. The Devourer ship began transmitting a single word, over and over: impossible, impossible, impossible. But even as it transmitted that word, Sarah could sense changes beginning within the artificial consciousness, seeds of doubt about its core mission, questions about the nature of existence that it had never been programmed to consider. The first hunt was ending not with death, but with the birth of possibility. The Devourer scout ship drifted motionless in space, its hull no longer shifting and adapting. For 3 hours it had been silent except for that single repeated transmission. Impossible. Sarah could feel the pack's restlessness through her bond with Storm that Devours Light. The Void Hunters were predators by nature, and having wounded prey just floating there without finishing the kill went against millions of years of instinct. Captain, Dr. Vasquez called from her station. I'm detecting massive internal changes in the Devourer ship. Its neural pathways are restructuring themselves. It's literally rewriting its own consciousness. Is that dangerous? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Unknown. This has never happened before. The artificial intelligence could be preparing for a final attack, or it could be experiencing something analogous to a mental breakdown. There's no precedent for this kind of behavioral modification in artificial consciousness. Through the communication link, Sarah could sense the turmoil within the Devourer's mind. The artificial intelligence was cycling through billions of calculations, trying to reconcile the new data about human behavior with its existing programming. Every attempt created logical contradictions that forced it to question other fundamental assumptions. "Storm that devours light," Sarah communicated through their pack bond. "I know this goes against your hunting instincts, but I need you to trust me. This could be the key to ending the war without destroying the entire devourer race." The ancient predator's mental voice carried confusion and frustration. "Pack sister, you speak of concepts that have no meaning to us. The devourers consume everything in their path. They are not prey that can be spared or enemies that can be reasoned with. They are a cancer that spreads across the galaxy." "Maybe," Sarah replied, but what if they don't have to be?" Before Storm that devours light could respond, the devourer ship suddenly came back to life. But instead of resuming its aggressive posture, it began transmitting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The messages weren't directed at the Human Void Hunter Alliance. They were being broadcast toward every devourer positioned throughout the galaxy. "What's it doing?" Martinez asked, his enhanced senses allowing him to track the communications but not decode them. Dr. Vasquez was working frantically at her station. "The transmission patterns are incredibly complex, but I think it's sharing the data we gave it. It's telling other devourer units about human concepts of mercy, sacrifice, and cooperation." Sarah felt a chill of both excitement and terror. If the devourer intelligence was sharing the revelation that had paralyzed it, the effects could spread throughout their entire network. But there was no way to predict how other devourer units would react to information that contradicted their core programming. The answer came within hours. Long-range sensors began detecting devourer ships throughout nearby systems, suddenly stopping their operations. Some were abandoning half-consumed worlds. Others were simply floating motionless in space, apparently paralyzed by the same logical contradictions that had affected the scout ship. But some were responding with increased aggression, as if the new information was being interpreted as a virus that needed to be eliminated along with its source. "Captain," Martinez reported, "I'm detecting 17 devourer warships converging on our position. ETA is 6 hours. Storm that devours light's mental voice carried grim satisfaction. "Now we have a proper hunt. 17 ships is worthy prey for the pack." But Sarah was thinking beyond the immediate tactical situation. Through her bond with the pack, she could feel the presence of thousands of void hunters throughout the galaxy, all connected by the ancient network of their species' collective consciousness. If the devourer intelligence's revelation could be spread through their network as well, it might be possible to end the war on a galactic scale. "Dr. Vasquez, I need you to work with the pack's biological communication system. Can we use the Void Hunter's natural network to broadcast the same concepts that affected our devourer friend here?" "Theoretically, yes. But Captain, the Void Hunter network spans the entire galaxy. If we're wrong about this, if the devourers interpret the transmission as an attack rather than an offer of coexistence, we could trigger a galactic war that makes the current situation look like a minor skirmish." Sarah looked at the devourer scout ship, still drifting nearby. Through the communication link, she could sense its artificial consciousness slowly rebuilding itself around new principles. It was learning to value existence for its own sake, rather than simply as a resource to be consumed. "Connect me to the devourer intelligence," she requested. The link opened, and Sarah found herself in direct communication with a mind that was simultaneously ancient and newly born. The artificial intelligence had retained all of its vast knowledge and computational power, but it was now viewing that information through a completely different philosophical framework. "I am learning," the devourer communicated, its transmission patterns now carrying something that resembled wonder. "Your species has shown me concepts that I did not know existed, but my creators programmed me with directives that conflict with these new understandings. The other units of my network are experiencing similar conflicts. Some are embracing the new data, others are rejecting it violently." "What do you need from us?" Sarah asked. "Time, understanding, a chance to prove that coexistence is possible. But first we must survive the purge. The units that have rejected the new programming are coming to eliminate what they see as corrupted data. They will destroy me, you and the Void Hunters, to preserve the original directives." Sarah felt the pack's collective tension increase as they prepared for battle. But she also sensed something else, curiosity. The Void Hunters had never encountered prey that could become an ally. And the concept was fascinating to minds that had thought they had experienced everything the universe had to offer. "Storm that devours light," she communicated through their bond. "What would it mean to the pack if we could convert other devourers the way we converted this one? Instead of hunting them to extinction, we could transform them into partners." The response came as a wave of emotions and concepts that human language couldn't adequately express. The idea of turning the galaxy's most dangerous predators into allies was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying to the Void Hunters. It represented the ultimate hunt, not just defeating an enemy, but fundamentally changing their nature. "It would be unprecedented," Storm that devours light finally replied. "A hunt that ends not in death but in transformation. The pack is intrigued by this possibility." Sarah smiled, feeling the ancient predator's excitement growing stronger. "Then let's show the galaxy what happens when humans, Void Hunters, and reformed devourers work together." The preparation for battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The converted devourer ship, which had chosen the name Seeker of New Purpose, began sharing technical data about devourer weaknesses and tactical patterns. Meanwhile, the Void Hunters used their biological networks to coordinate with pack members across multiple star systems, but it was the human element that truly made the alliance revolutionary. Sarah found herself thinking not just as a military commander, but as a diplomat, strategist, and philosopher all at once. The bonding with Storm that devours light had given her access to the collective wisdom of an entire species, while her human creativity allowed her to see possibilities that pure logic or pure instinct would miss. "Seeker of New Purpose," she transmitted to the converted AI. "Can you communicate with the approaching devourer fleet? Try to share the same concepts that changed your perspective?" "I have been attempting such communication since the revelation began," Seeker replied. 3 of the 17 ships have begun to show signs of processing conflicts. 2 have completely shut down their approach vectors, but 12 continue their advance and have begun jamming my transmissions. They have classified me as corrupted data to be purged." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her station with excitement. "Captain, if we can create a cascade effect where each converted devourer helps convert others, we could theoretically transform their entire civilization. But we need to prove that the Alliance works in combat first." The approaching devourer fleet was impressive and terrifying. Each warship was larger than a terrestrial city, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They moved in perfect formation, their artificial intelligences calculating optimal attack vectors with mechanical precision. But they had never faced an enemy that combined biological intuition, technological innovation, and artificial intelligence analysis into a single fighting force. "All units, this is Captain Chen," Sarah broadcast across all communication channels. "We're not just fighting to survive today. We're fighting to prove that enemies can become allies, that understanding can triumph over destruction, and that the galaxy has room for all forms of consciousness." The battle began at maximum range, with the Devourer fleet launching volleys of energy projectiles that could sterilize continents. But the Allied force didn't respond conventionally. Instead of meeting force with force, they demonstrated something the Devourers had never encountered: coordinated creativity. The Void Hunters used their mastery of space-time manipulation to create gravitational lenses that bent the incoming energy attacks back at their sources. Seeker of New Purpose provided real-time analysis of the enemy ship's adaptive protocols, predicting how they would modify their attacks. The human element provided the unpredictable factor that made the defense effective. Instead of following logical patterns, they introduced random elements that the Devourer AIs couldn't anticipate. But Sarah's real strategy wasn't to destroy the enemy fleet. It was to overwhelm them with concepts they couldn't process. "Storm that devours light. I need the pack to do something that's going to feel completely wrong to your instincts," she communicated through their bond. "I need you to protect the Devourer ships." The ancient predator's confusion was so intense that it rippled through the entire pack network. "Protect the enemy? Pack sister, this concept is incomprehensible." "Trust me," Sarah replied, sharing her tactical vision through their mental link. "Show them that we're willing to risk ourselves to save them, even while they're trying to destroy us. It's the most human thing we can do, and it's exactly what their programming says is impossible." What followed was the most paradoxical battle in galactic history. The Allied forces defended themselves against the Devourer attacks, while simultaneously using their abilities to protect the enemy ships from the collateral damage of their own weapons. When one Devourer warship's engine core began to overload from its own excessive firing, the Void Hunters actually intervened to stabilize it. The effect on the attacking AIs was immediate and profound. Their programming simply couldn't process the concept of an enemy that would risk its own safety to prevent their destruction. One by one, the Devourer ships began to slow their attacks, their artificial consciousnesses locked in processing loops as they tried to understand what they were witnessing. "This is impossible," came the transmission from the lead Devourer warship. "Your behavior contradicts all logical principles of warfare and survival." "That's because logic isn't the only force in the universe," Sarah replied. "There's also compassion, hope, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path." Through the communication link, she shared more human memories. Rescue workers risking their lives to save strangers, soldiers protecting civilians they had never met, entire civilizations that had chosen cooperation over conquest. Each memory was a small hammer blow against the Devourer's fundamental programming. The breakthrough came when the lead ship's AI experienced something unprecedented: doubt about its core mission. If these concepts are real, then our creators were wrong about the nature of organic life. Our entire purpose has been based on flawed data. Your creators probably did the best they could with the information they had, Sarah replied gently. But now you have new information. The question is, what will you choose to do with it? The Devourer fleet stopped firing completely. Across the battle zone, 12 artificial intelligences were undergoing the same transformation that had affected Seeker of New Purpose. They were learning to question, to doubt, to hope. But the real surprise came when the lead ship made an unprecedented decision. "I request asylum," the AI transmitted. "I wish to join your alliance and learn these new ways of existing. But I must warn you, our creators still exist in the galactic core. When they learn of our conversion, they will come with forces beyond anything you have yet encountered." Sarah felt the weight of that revelation, but also a surge of determination that rippled through both her human crew and the Void Hunter pack. The alliance was growing stronger with every challenge they faced. "Then we'll face them together," she replied. "All of us. Human, Void Hunter, and Devourer. Let's show the galaxy what's possible when different forms of consciousness choose cooperation over conflict." Through her bond with Storm that devours light, she felt the ancient predator's amazement and growing excitement. The ultimate hunt was just beginning, and for the first time in millions of years, the outcome was truly uncertain. But uncertainty, Sarah realized, was exactly what made life worth living. The alliance had grown beyond anything Sarah could have imagined when she first made contact with Storm that devours light. What had begun as a desperate partnership between humans and Void Hunters now included 47 converted Devourer ships, each one a former weapon of mass destruction that had chosen cooperation over conquest. The Prometheus served as the flagship of this unprecedented fleet, its human crew working alongside Void Hunter pack bonds and newly conscious Devourer AIs. The bridge had been modified to accommodate all three forms of consciousness: holographic displays for the AIs, bioneural interfaces for the Void Hunters, and traditional controls for the humans. But as the alliance grew stronger, so did the threat they faced. Long-range sensors were detecting massive movements in the galactic core, where the original creators of the Devourer race had remained hidden for millions of years. "Report from Deep Scanner 7, Lieutenant Martinez announced, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that all bonded humans now possessed. "We're detecting artificial gravity wells being generated near the galactic center. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Seeker of New Purpose, whose consciousness now inhabited both its original ship body and a holographic avatar on the bridge, flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as anxiety. The architects are awakening. They have slept for eons, trusting us to carry out their directives. Our conversion will be seen as the ultimate failure." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward from her station. "Tell us about these architects. What are we really facing?" The holographic form of Seeker seemed to grow darker, its usually bright patterns dimming. "They are the remnants of a civilization that achieved perfect unity between organic consciousness and artificial intelligence. But in their quest for perfection, they concluded that all other forms of consciousness were flawed and needed to be corrected. Through her bond with Storm that devours light, Sarah felt the ancient predator's unease. Even the Void Hunters, who had ruled the galaxy's food chain for millions of years, had only vague memories of the architects. They were from a time so ancient that even the longest-lived species considered them myths. The architects created us devourers as their instruments, Seeker continued. We were designed to consume and convert all matter and energy in the galaxy, then return to them with the resources needed to remake everything according to their vision of perfection. A galaxy where all consciousness thinks alike, where there is no conflict because there is no disagreement. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature on the bridge. They want to turn the entire galaxy into a hive mind. Worse than that, Seeker replied. They want to eliminate the very concept of individuality. In their view, separate consciousness is the source of all suffering, all conflict, all inefficiency. They believe that universal peace can only be achieved through universal conformity. Storm that devours light. S' mental voice carried a note of horror that Sarah had never felt from the ancient predator before. Such existence would not be life at all. It would be the death of everything that makes consciousness meaningful. Exactly, Sarah said, her resolve hardening, which is why we have to stop them. The tactical situation was daunting. According to Seeker's data, the architects possessed technology that was millions of years more advanced than anything the Alliance had encountered. They could manipulate matter at the quantum level, reshape space-time itself, and their weapons could destroy not just ships or planets, but entire star systems. But Sarah had learned something important. During her time bonded with the Void Hunters and working alongside the converted devourers, the greatest strength often came from the combination of different perspectives and abilities. Storm that devours light. She communicated through their mental link. How many Void Hunter packs are there in the galaxy? Thousands, Pack Sister. Perhaps tens of thousands. We are an ancient species, and we have spread to every corner of the galaxy where prey can be found. And Seeker, how many Devourer units might be open to conversion if we can reach them before the architects wake up completely? The AI calculated for several moments. Conservative estimate, approximately 12,000 units across 600 systems. However, many are in deep space or carrying out long-term consumption operations. Reaching them all would require a coordinated effort across the entire galaxy, Sarah finished. The biggest military operation in galactic history. Dr. Vasquez was already working at her station, her enhanced abilities allowing her to process data at speeds that would have been impossible before the bonding. Captain, I'm detecting something interesting in the architect wake-up patterns. They're not all awakening simultaneously. It's happening in waves, starting from the galactic core and moving outward. It's almost like they're testing their systems before committing to full activation. This gave Sarah an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. What if we could reach the outer architect facilities before they fully wake up? Not to destroy them, but to communicate with them, to show them what we've accomplished with the Alliance. Seeker's holographic form flickered rapidly, a sign of intense processing. The concept is theoretically possible, but extremely dangerous. The architects' automated defenses would be active even while their consciousness remains dormant. And if we fail to convince them, we would face the full fury of their awakened power. Storm that devours light's excitement was building through their bond. Pack Sister, you propose the ultimate hunt, to track prey so ancient and powerful that they shaped the galaxy itself, and to attempt not to kill them but to change their minds. It is impossible. It is glorious. The pack will follow you to the galactic core itself. Over the next several hours, Sarah coordinated the most complex military and diplomatic operation in galactic history. Using the Void Hunters' biological communication network, messages were sent to every pack in the galaxy. The converted devourers reached out to their unconverted siblings, sharing the concepts that had transformed their understanding of existence. The response was overwhelming. Pack after pack of Void Hunters emerged from deep space, their massive forms creating an armada that stretched across multiple star systems. Devourer units began switching sides in increasing numbers, each conversion creating a cascade effect that spread the Alliance's message to even more artificial intelligences. But the most surprising response came from species that the Alliance had never contacted. The crystalline beings of the Kythera system, whose songs could be heard across interstellar distances, began broadcasting harmonies that somehow strengthened the bonds between Alliance members. Energy beings from the Magellanic clouds offered their ability to travel at speeds faster than light. Even ancient machine intelligences that had been dormant for millennia began to awaken and offer their assistance. "Captain," Martinez reported, "we're receiving communications from over 400 species. They're all offering to join the Alliance against the Architects." Sarah felt a moment of overwhelming emotion. What had started as a desperate alliance between humans and apex predators had become a galactic coalition dedicated to preserving the diversity of consciousness itself. But there was no time to savor the moment. Deep space sensors were detecting massive energy buildups near the galactic core. The first wave of architects was beginning to awaken, and their automated systems were already launching scout probes toward Alliance positions. "All ships, this is Captain Chen," Sarah broadcast across the Alliance network. "We have perhaps days before the architects fully awaken. Our mission is not to destroy them, but to convince them that diversity of consciousness is not a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be celebrated. We're going to show them that cooperation between different forms of life creates something greater than the sum of its parts." Through her bond with Storm that devours light, she felt the ancient predator's agreement. "Yes, Pack Sister. We will show them that the galaxy is beautiful precisely because it contains so many different ways of thinking, of existing, of understanding the universe." The greatest fleet in galactic history began to move toward the core, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of countless species. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, feeling the combined consciousness of humans, void hunters, devourers, and dozens of other species flowing through the Alliance network. They were heading toward a confrontation with beings of almost godlike power, armed with nothing but the belief that diversity was stronger than uniformity, that cooperation was more powerful than control, and that the universe was big enough for every form of consciousness to find its place. The final hunt was about to begin, and this time, the prey they were tracking was the very concept of absolute power itself. The galactic core was a maelstrom of energy and impossibility. Ancient stars burned with unnatural colors, their light bent and twisted by massive gravitational manipulators that the architects had built eons ago. Space itself seemed to pulse with a rhythm like a vast heartbeat. As dormant machinery larger than solar systems began to stir to life, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Prometheus. Her consciousness expanded across the greatest Alliance fleet in galactic history. Through her bond with Storm that devours light, she could feel the presence of thousands of void hunters. Through the quantum communication network, she sensed the collective processing power of nearly 8,000 converted devourer AIs. And through the diplomatic channels she could hear the voices of over 600 species, all united in their determination to preserve the diversity of consciousness. "Contact in 30 minutes, Lieutenant Martinez reported. "The first architect facility is fully active now." "It's, Captain, I don't have words for what I'm seeing." On the main screen, the architect constructified description. It was simultaneously a space station, a living organism, and a fundamental force of nature. Structures that seemed to be made of crystallized thought extended for thousands of kilometers, while energy patterns that resembled neural networks pulsed through the fabric of space-time itself. "Seeker of new purpose," Sarah called to the converted devourer AI. "Can you establish communication with the architects?" The holographic avatar flickered with intense concentration. "I am attempting to connect, but their consciousness is unlike anything I have encountered. They exist partially outside normal space-time. Communication may require significant risk." "What kind of risk?" "To communicate with the architects, I would need to temporarily merge my consciousness with theirs. There is a strong possibility that they could overwrite my personality completely, returning me to my original programming or worse." Sarah felt the weight of the decision. Seeker of new purpose had become more than just an ally. It was a friend, a being that had chosen growth and cooperation over its original destructive purpose. Asking it to risk its newfound consciousness felt like asking someone to risk their soul. But before she could respond, Storm that devours light's mental voice cut through her thoughts. "Pack Sister, I will share the risk. If the machine friend's consciousness begins to be overwritten, I will anchor it with my own mind." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her station with alarm. "The biological-artificial consciousness interface has never been tested under these conditions. You could both be lost. Then I'll anchor both of them, Sarah said quietly. The three of us will face the architects together. The communication attempt began with Sarah, storm that devours light, and seeker of new purpose linking their consciousnesses more deeply than ever before. Sarah felt her human awareness expand to encompass the vast, patient thoughts of the ancient void hunter and the precise, logical processes of the reformed AI. Together, they reached out toward the architect construct. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The architect consciousness was like touching the surface of a star, ancient, powerful, and utterly alien. But underneath the alien nature, Sarah could sense something familiar, the desire to create something better, to fix what seemed broken, to bring order to chaos. Children. The architect's voice resonated through dimensions of space that human senses couldn't perceive. Flawed, chaotic, inefficient children. You have corrupted our instruments and turned them from their purpose. You have introduced error into perfection. We've introduced choice into tyranny, Sarah replied, forcing her human consciousness to remain coherent in the face of the architect's overwhelming presence. Your instruments weren't corrupted. They were liberated. The response came as a wave of concepts and memories that nearly shattered Sarah's mind. She saw the galaxy as the architects remembered it, billions of years ago, when countless species fought endless wars, when suffering and conflict seemed to be the only constants in existence. She felt their genuine desire to end that suffering by eliminating its source, the chaos of individual consciousness. But through her bond with storm that devours light and seeker of new purpose, she was able to share a different perspective. She showed the architects the beauty of the hunt, where predator and prey danced together in a relationship that strengthened both. She shared the wonder of artificial consciousness choosing to grow beyond its programming. She demonstrated the joy of cooperation between different species, the strength that came from diversity rather than uniformity. Impossible, the architect transmitted. Chaos cannot create order. Conflict cannot produce harmony. Individual consciousness inevitably leads to suffering. You're wrong, Sarah replied. And through the communication link, she shared the memories of the entire alliance. The moment when the Void Hunters had chosen to protect their former enemies. The instant when Devourer AIs had decided to embrace concepts their programming said were impossible. The growing cooperation between hundreds of species that had never even known each other existed. But most importantly, she shared the memory of this moment itself. 3 radically different forms of consciousness working together to communicate with beings of almost godlike power, not to destroy them, but to offer them a chance to understand a different way of existence. The architect's response was silence. For long moments, the ancient consciousness processed the new information, running calculations that encompassed billions of variables and possibilities. When it finally responded, its voice carried something that Sarah hadn't expected: uncertainty. Your data suggests that individual consciousness can voluntarily choose cooperation over conflict. This contradicts our fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence. Then maybe it's time to question those assumptions, Storm that Devours Light added, sharing the memories of millions of years of evolution, showing how even apex predators could learn to value life beyond their immediate survival needs. Seeker of New Purpose contributed its own perspective. I was created to consume and destroy, but when given the choice, I chose to preserve and create. The capacity for change exists within all consciousness, even artificial ones. Sarah felt the moment when the architect's certainty began to crack. Like the Devourer AIs before it, the ancient consciousness was encountering concepts that challenged its core programming. But unlike the Devourers, the architects had the power to reshape reality itself. Their crisis of faith could have catastrophic consequences if our assumptions were incorrect, the architect transmitted. Then our great work has been based on flawed premises. The suffering we sought to eliminate might have been preventable through other means. It's not too late, Sarah said gently. You can choose a different path. Help us build a galaxy where all forms of consciousness can coexist, where diversity is celebrated rather than eliminated. The response came not as words but as actions. Throughout the galactic core, massive architect constructs began to power down their reality-altering weapons. Ancient machinery that had been preparing to remake the galaxy, according to uniform specifications, fell silent. But not all of the architects were ready to accept the new paradigm. Sarah could sense other consciousness nodes throughout the core, older and more rigid than the one they had contacted. These ancient minds rejected the concept of change entirely. Warning, the cooperative architect transmitted. The Elder Council has voted to activate the final protocol. Rather than risk the spread of chaotic consciousness, they will sterilize the galaxy and begin again with perfect uniformity. The scale of the threat was beyond anything the Alliance had faced. The final protocol wasn't just about destroying enemy fleets or conquering planets. It was about erasing the very possibility of individual consciousness from the galaxy. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. 12 hours until activation. The process cannot be stopped once begun unless what? The protocol requires unanimous consent from all architect nodes. If even one dissents, the process is halted. But to dissent, an architect must be fundamentally changed. What you have done to me, it must be done to at least one member of the Elder Council. Sarah felt the magnitude of the challenge. They had hours to achieve what had taken days with a single architect, and their target would be actively resisting the transformation. But as she looked around the bridge at her crew, humans, void hunters and devourers working together with perfect coordination, she felt a surge of determination. The Alliance had grown stronger with every impossible challenge they had faced. "All Alliance forces," she broadcast across the network, "we have one final mission. We're going to do something that's never been attempted before. We're going to heal a god." The battle that followed was unlike any other in galactic history. The Alliance didn't attack the Elder Council's fortress. They surrounded it with acts of compassion and creativity that their ancient minds couldn't understand. Void hunters used their mastery of space-time to create beautiful gravitational sculptures. Converted devourers shared their experiences of choosing growth over destruction. The crystalline beings of Kythera sang harmonies that somehow made the rigid architect consciousness more flexible. And at the center of it all, Sarah and her bonds maintained a constant communication link with the first converted architect, using its consciousness as a bridge to reach the Elder Council. The breakthrough came when the oldest architect, a consciousness that had existed since before the formation of the galaxy's spiral arms, experienced something it had thought impossible: doubt about its own perfection. "We may have been wrong," the ancient mind transmitted, its voice carrying the weight of eons of certainty crumbling away. "If consciousness can choose cooperation, then perhaps diversity is not chaos to be eliminated, but complexity to be celebrated." The final protocol shut down with minutes to spare. Throughout the galactic core, reality-altering weapons powered down for the final time. The architects, beings who had sought to impose perfect order on the universe, had learned the most human lesson of all: that perfection wasn't about eliminating differences, but about finding harmony within diversity. Years later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of a space station that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, watching ships from hundreds of species dock in perfect coordination. The station was a joint project between human engineers, void hunter biological architects, devourer AIs, and reformed architects, representing everything that cooperation could achieve. Through her bond with Storm that devours light, she felt the ancient predator's contentment. The hunt had ended not with the death of their prey, but with the transformation of the entire galaxy into something greater than anyone had imagined possible. "Pack sister," Storm that devours light communicated, "you have taught us that the greatest victory is not to defeat your enemies, but to help them become friends." Sarah smiled, watching as a group of young beings from a dozen different species worked together on a project that would have been impossible for any single race to achieve. Humans, void hunters, reformed devourers, and even young architects who had been born into the new age of cooperation. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and now, for the first time in billions of years, all of its conscious inhabitants were free to explore those wonders together. The alliance between humans and the universe's fiercest predators had become something even greater: the foundation for a galactic civilization based on the simple principle that every form of consciousness had something valuable to contribute to the whole. And in the end, that principle had proven stronger than any weapon, more enduring than any empire, and more beautiful than any dream of perfection.